those of you who don't know me, my name is Susie Ashworth and I am co-founder of the Calm Birth School, the world's first video-based hypnobirthing program, and we help women all over the world create calm and positive birth experiences. And I am beyond excited to have today with us the beautiful, wonderful Lana Schleifer. I hope I've pronounced your surname.
Yes, you did. You did.
I'm just so excited to have you here. I'm a bit of a fangirl. So, yeah, I have been following Lana online for the last couple of years. She is a life and business mentor and a specialist in the law of attraction. And not only the presence that you bring online is just really magnetizing and amazing, but you have the most incredible birth story that I have probably ever heard in my life. And I've heard quite a few birth stories now. So I really just wanted to invite you on today to share with our audience, the Calm Birth School students and all of the women out there, your experience really from pregnancy, birth, the transition to motherhood, and just how you did what you did, you amazing woman.
That's a lot. That's a lot to cover because I feel in many ways, I find that women fall into three categories. One category is they've always known they want to have kids. Mm-hmm. And it was important to them. Yeah. One is they felt very ambivalent, like, yeah, I don't know. And the other one is they really just knew from the beginning they never wanted kids. Yeah. I very clearly fell into the I want kids, and like it was just assumed I would have kids, but it was more intense for me than I realized later than for some other people. Like I would be 25 years old or something, and I would be thinking to myself, how would I want, like if I had kids now and I'm doing this action, would I want them to see it?
Wow.
You know what I mean? It was in my mind, like in subtle ways, it would sneak in. Like I said this to my boyfriend when I was 23, and this was a serious boyfriend. We dated for a few years. And I realized at that point that for him, and I don't know if this is for all guys and all women, but I saw this pattern. He really needed to become a provider because we wanted to have a family at some point later. And he really, like, it's a biological drive, it felt like, for him to become this man who could provide and support, like bring food and stuff to the table. And what I realized is, as much as I was, working investment banking and earning a lot of money and providing for myself, I started feeling it probably starting in my mid-20s, this really big impulse to self-fulfill, to self-realize, because I realized that I want to be a good nurturer. Yeah. I want to be a good provider, not in the physical sense, but in the emotional sense. And that's when it really hit me. Like, I have no idea how to do that. I didn't have particularly great examples from my family. My parents loved me and did amazing things to bring us to this country. I grew up in Russia, but they didn't love me in a way that I wanted to love my kids, because frankly, they didn't receive that from their parents. And, life was just so complicated for them. They really couldn't have the ability to be emotionally present in a way that I realized somebody could be.
Yeah.
So I realized, okay, it might be possible, but I have no idea how. I felt like a total mess throughout my 20s, really. Had a huge kind of, quarter life crisis, realizing that everything that I worked for since high school was just not really going to make me happy. Hugely disillusioned with life. And then at some point realizing, like, I don't know if I'd be a good mom. I don't know if I even want a family. I'm fucked up, basically. like how is this going to work?
Yeah.
And so I felt like the last few years of my 20s were just this real intense period of self-discovery and looking to how I can become a whole person, and not even knowing what that meant. So by the time my husband proposed, I just started grad school in transpersonal psychology. I did this grad school program mostly so that I could figure myself out. And then I was like, yeah, and it'd be great if eventually I can help other people. But this was the fourth or fifth step in a series of many steps, like studying yoga, teaching yoga. All of these were steps for me to really find some semblance of peace and wholeness and understanding of how I could be happy, so that I could be happy with kids eventually. So by the time that he proposed and we got pregnant a month later, like I say, we celebrated a little too hard, and woo! And then all of a sudden we realized it's twins. I mean, that threw me into a huge loop.
Yeah.
Like,
so that's a big loop. Can you remember the actual day that you found out that you were having twins?
We were in the midwives. I didn't know what kind of birth I wanted because I never really thought about it. But my mom is so holistic, even though she's a nurse, and I was so holistic. I just kind of assumed I would look for whatever the holistic method was, because that's how I've always been. And so, okay, we looked up a midwife and this was our first appointment. I think I was 10 or 11 weeks along. And the whole pregnancy was a surprise anyway. And we had already started thinking about, okay, what does that mean? Am I going to finish grad school? And then we go in and she's doing the ultrasound and she goes, oh, like, do not say, oh, in the middle of an appointment. And then she says, I need to transfer you to our doctor on staff. And I'm like, you have to tell me what's going on. Well, I see 2 heartbeats, but I can't confirm it. This is a Friday afternoon appointment. I can't confirm it. We'll get you in first thing Monday morning. Are you fucking kidding me? So as she's telling me this, Francis, my husband, is literally doing a dance around the room like, woohoo! And I'm crying, like, no, oh my God, no. Like, this is so not, like, I can hardly imagine taking care of 1 baby. Now you're telling me there might be 2, and might be, like, not even confirming, you know? But it was clear, you could see on the ultrasound, I could see what she was talking about. But she was saying that she doesn't handle, in this practice, the midwives did not handle twins at all. So she really didn't want to have anything to do with us past that point. So that weekend was rough because it was like my whole world turn apart, but in a good way, right? Because I'm thinking, okay, twins, my grandfather's a twin. That's the only twin I have in my family. So it was definitely unexpected, but okay, you know, trying to make peace with it. Then we went in on Monday and got confirmed. And then something shifted, you know, it's like, you know, necessity is the mother of invention. It's like, okay, now this is here. Like, this isn't anymore an option, or what do I want to figure out? Like, I have to figure this out.
Yeah.
And because I think I built up all of this momentum and this intention around kids, I didn't realize it until I was faced with this news that all of a sudden it just became crystal clear that nothing else mattered. And in some ways, I had this experience during finals in school, where when you're going through a period of intense exams, it's like you set aside everything. You set aside any common or patterns or habits that you have. You don't call people back. You don't operate as you do in normal life. You go into this like kind of narrow focused experience. And I felt like in many ways, the pregnancy just put me in this narrow focus that I didn't even know I was capable of for sustaining for that long of a period of time. Yeah. But all of a sudden, like, I told my parents about the news. My dad was thrilled. It's his dad that was the twin. My mom was crying. She was basically like, you're not established. You're in grad school. You're in debt. Like, she was freaking out. And I was just like, okay, you can have your freak out. Go have it outside of me. Like, it was like all of a sudden I had all these boundaries that I was like, I'm not gonna deal with other people's reactions. I just focused on what I needed to do to be happy.
Because you immediately became the mother.
Immediately became the mother. And it was so important to me. And being in grad school and studying this neonatal and prenatal psychology and realizing that pregnancy is such a formative experience. And I was like, hell no. Like, that's it. I became like a mama bear immediately. It was like nothing was going to encroach on me feeling good. And it became this almost like boot camp in finding happiness, because it became so important to me to have well-being in my mind, body, and spirit. And I think the difference between me and other women is two things. One is I believed it's possible that I could find happiness, especially being in my grad school program and being around these amazing people that in many ways did arrive at this place of wholeness and self-fulfillment. I saw that it was possible. And two is I'm like a bulldog or something. Once I bite into a pit bull, once I get it, like I'm going to hold on to it. Like I am not going to waver. I have this stubborn streak to my personality that my mom has always said, like, you have a will, like unlike any other person. And so I just latched onto this idea that I wanted to have the most enjoyable, safe, well-being, surrounded by well-being pregnancy that I could. And I felt like because I believed it was possible and because I was willing to look for ways to make it happen, that's the only thing that distinguishes me from any other woman that I've heard of. They either didn't believe it was possible or they weren't willing or capable to holding on to that vision with such a high focus that they could bring it to life.
Okay, so there's two things here. So there's one, that well-being and happiness in pregnancy, but then there's a birth story, which is, I mean,
but I feel like the birth story was the culmination of the pregnancy, which is why I think actually the birth story is the culmination of everything I've done. I've been meditating since I was 20, practicing yoga since I was 20. My body was, whether I had huge body dysmorphia things, I had binge eating disorder in my late teens, early 20s. I had to deal with a lot of disconnect from my body to step into it more fully later and realize that my body is so wise, that I have an intuition. So it was years of practice for me to get to the birth, to do what was, so I always like to give this analogy, a story that I heard, that there's a farmer and he lifted this small calf every day over the fence to take him to the pasture. And he lifted it every day. And so as the calf grew and became a bull, the farmer's strength grew and he could lift the bull as easily a year later as he could lift the calf. So that's what I've been doing. So people look at my birth story and they're like, wow, she lifted a bull. But what they don't see is the years of prep that happened, which is why I think I really want to say that it's not that I'm somehow unique or different or have super talent or superpower. It's just that I focused on this. This was important to me. And so I dedicated time and energy and focus to it. So by the time I got to the birth, it was easy for me to trust my intuition. Not totally easy. I had doubts. I have things I need to work through. There were challenges that came up, but it was easier than for most people that I've connected with that say like, wow, I don't think I could ever do that. I don't think I could. So the birth story, just to summarize, we moved 6 months into my pregnancy to where my husband's parents lived. And so I was like 6.5 months pregnant, needed to find a birth care provider, found a doctor who was supportive of home birth really easily. Now I did a lot of meditation, a lot of prayer, a lot of like manifestational practices, visioning and everything. So that was already amazing to find somebody who is an MD in the US, willing to accommodate a home birth for twins. But she did have conditions. She was like, there's certain conditions under which I cannot go along with this anymore. I said, okay, let's just keep it, going as much as we can. Then the search for the midwife began. And that was by far the most complicated because even midwives who were so meaning licensed midwives here in the US told me, a licensed midwife will not take you because with twins, it gets very complicated. Very few know what to do. And two is you're so far into your pregnancy. At the end, I didn't find my midwife till I was 33 weeks. So really, I was searching from 20 some weeks till 30 some weeks. And they were telling me once you get past 28, 29 weeks, midwives are going to be reluctant to take you because you're so far along and blah, blah, blah. And so I was getting so much discouragement from, the peanut gallery, from the world, that I don't know where the strength came from. There are a bunch of factors that happened. There were a bunch of mystical experiences that happened that gave me faith. For example, Michael Beckwith, who's in the movie The Secret and who has a spiritual center here in LA. I've started taking some classes that summer when we moved back. I was 6 months pregnant. I'm taking these classes on the affirmative power of prayer. I'm a total atheist. I grew up in communism. I don't even use the words God and prayer, but I felt inspired to take them. I was so open-minded at this point. And I had a chance to meet him, and I'm obviously super pregnant. And I come up to him to say, hey, I would love a blessing for our birth. And before he says anything to me, he says, are you having a home birth? And he has these very deep, dark eyes like you do, but they're very intense.
Yeah.
So he looks me in the eye and says, are you having a home birth? And I go, well, that's what I wanted to talk to you about this one. And he's like, no. Are you having a home birth? And drills into me. And I just say, yes, I am. He goes, good. And so it is.
Oh, God.
And that moment was so powerful, like the way that my body received that. So in moments of doubt, when all of these midwives and doctors are telling me this isn't going to happen, one of the things I would go back to is he knew. I trust in that moment. It was so clear to me that he knew. It was so clear to me that we both knew. This wasn't a fluke. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was holding on to any hope that I could find, and then I could find more of it.
Yeah.
My intuition was very clearly telling me that I would find someone. And so lo and behold, we found this lay midwife, unlicensed midwife, who's been delivering babies for 30 years, has triplets herself. She had 7 kids total, delivered like 500 some babies, 60 breeches, 15 sets of twins. I mean, she was by far the most experienced person I've ever met out of any doctors that I've ever heard. And she was willing to take us. And I just knew instantly when I saw her. So once that was in place, it was like all of the elements were in place. I felt like now it was just about listening to my body. And here's the difference. I never felt like I had to have a home birth.
Yeah.
I wanted a sacred birth that honored me as a woman. If that was in a hospital, fine. If that was at home, fine. If that was in the car, fine. I realized at that point, and I've been studying the law of attraction, starting to teach it, that I couldn't hold on too tight to a certain vision or I would be limiting myself.
Yeah.
And so that was a big piece of it. Once I connected with Brenda, we both knew that we wanted a safe birth. And so if things came up where I needed to go to the hospital, so be it. We registered a hospital. Yeah. And then there was there's a bunch of things in the story that people could read about. The fact that Zanti, my baby A, turned breech. The doctor now no longer wanted to allow me a home birth, wanted to schedule a cesarean at 38 weeks. I think it was 37 weeks. That was really challenging for me because at that point, I really clearly moved away from contact with her and said, I'm going to try to go into natural labor and see what happens. That was really hard.
Yeah, can I just, because there are so many, particularly on in the States, who do feel they come up, it's like you say, they come up against the gallery and so, how do you, it's about that intuition. We talk loads about getting quiet and listening to your body and connecting with your baby and how much that will aid you during your birth if you're able to practice that during your pregnancy. Yeah. How do you do that?
It's actually very simple. You have to hope, acknowledge, or hypothesize that you have an intuition. Okay, so you start with the belief, maybe I have one. Then you start with the belief, especially if you're pregnant, that your baby is very much a whole being with a consciousness, with ability to communicate. So there are 2 of you here that are trying to establish connection with each other, and you're trying to establish connection with your own consciousness. So if you acknowledge that and say, every day I'm going to look for a way to do that, you will be amazed at how many books will fall off the shelves for you, how many videos will come into your news feed that will guide you. There's no right path. Meditation's a huge help because it helps you quiet down all the other voices, hear your own, but it's not helpful for everyone. If you've had severe trauma, severe sexual trauma, severe voices in your head that when you quiet down, they come up, it's actually re-traumatizing yourself to meditate. Great. That's not a good way. Do more of a guided meditation, do some guided visualization, work one-on-one with practitioners like me, with other people who do specific exercise and practices while you're with them to help you connect with intuition. Yoga, dance, creative expression, art. I mean, I could go on and on. There is no right path, being in nature. But it has to, you have to look for it and practice it. I don't believe that there is a right way for each person, but there's so many things, just try them out and see what they are. And I had this 8-week course that I'm now remaking into a membership. My 8-week course was really like the culmination of everything I've lived, where I was offering you a huge menu of ways to connect with your intuition. And I was guiding you through each one. Try this, try this, try this, try this, try this. What do you feel? What do you feel? What do you feel? What do you feel? And by the time that you're done with these 8 weeks, you're amazed at how much you've discovered about you being able to connect with you. So it's not rocket science. Everybody's got intuition or soul or heart connection or whatever you want to call it, God connection. It's just a matter of looking for it. Like anything, whatever you focus on, it will expand. So it's focusing on it enough, and it has to matter to you enough at that point, right?
Yeah.
So I give you an example that was the extreme example, just so you know the challenges that I faced, even though I had a good connection to my intuition. What did my connection to my intuition look like? I very clearly knew when I wanted to rest, when I needed to rest, and I was ruthless about taking that rest. I left grad school in my 3rd trimester because I put myself on like a modified bed rest. I was not on bed rest, but I knew that if I wanted to carry these babies full term, which I did, I'm going to take every precaution. I could care less about not having money. We moved in with my in-laws. My husband didn't have, when we left Bay Area, he didn't have a job now. None of the things that matter to people, we literally were in the worst financial situation since we were in our 20s and we're having twins. And I just decided that has to be irrelevant because my babies do not need money. They need a mother who's present. They need love. That's what they need. And that I could give without any amount of money. The way that we even manifested paying for the birth is we had a couple of baby showers, and instead of gifts and diapers and whatever people want to give you, I said, give a donation towards a home birth. And we raised more than enough for the birth. So when people say, I don't have money, I have to work, I have to do, I'm like, you choose to. Yeah. And I chose not to. I made huge sacrifices. They didn't seem like sacrifices because they were choices, but I made big decisions. Moved to Southern California where I knew 3 people when I'm 6 months pregnant. Huge, living with my in-laws who I barely have a relationship. I mean, I made huge choices, but I knew that this was going to allow me to have the most well-being and the most support during the pregnancy and after. So the connection to my body and to my intuition was there all along. But now there was a direct challenge. I'm sitting in the doctor's office and she's telling me, baby A is breech. He's footling breech, as a matter of fact. And I have never delivered a breech baby. I wouldn't know what to do. I cannot take on that liability. The only thing I can recommend for you is a C-section. And I prefer to schedule it before you go into labor. So schedule it for next week when you're 38 weeks. And I'm listening and I'm like literally my breath stopped. Yeah. Like I stopped breathing and I was just shocked. And my husband and I had a really bad fight in the car after because I was completely freaking out. And I had such pregnancy irrational brain. We were stopped. It's a 3-lane road. We're in the middle lane. I'm not in the lane closest to the sidewalk. And I so am annoyed with what he's saying and so upset. There was no car next to me, but I opened the car doors. He stopped and walked out in the middle of, he stopped at a light. He's like freaking out, but I had to get out. I mean, I looked around. I didn't walk into traffic. It was probably not the smartest thing, but it was just such a huge shock to me. Yeah. And so I felt like all of a sudden I needed to decide quickly. Yeah. Am I going to go along with the recommendation of the doctor or am I going to find some other path? And the challenge with that is that I had to trust in my intuition because I had no other basis. I had no other authority. I interviewed a bunch of doctors. I interviewed a bunch of midwives. I spent that week calling around to everyone I knew, talking about this, praying, to people whose opinion I valued, praying, meditating, talking to psychics. Never talked to a psychic in my life. I ended up calling a psychic and say, I have this huge resistance to going to do this birth. I really want to try to labor, but am I endangering my kids? Can you tell me anything? And she said, in my vision, I see you in the hospital completely unconscious. No wonder you're not afraid, but not wanting to go to that route, because I see you, the hospital will turn out badly for you. So I see a really peaceful home birth for you. So if you go that route, as far as I can tell, she's telling me her visions or whatever. And she said, there might be one problem with one of the babies, but it'll be easily resolved. And so, okay, that's great information. But so it was the hardest point up until now in my life where I had to decide, do I trust what my intuition is telling me or do I trust somebody else? Because my intuition or my babies speaking to me, which is also maybe what was happening, was so clearly for me laboring at home. Now, I didn't know if I was going to have a home birth or whatever, but I knew it didn't feel right to go and schedule a C-section. It just, my body would revolt when I would have that thought. And I really had to clear that. Is it because I'm against C-sections because I'm prejudiced, or is it because it really is not the right option for me? And I really had to make peace that week. If I have a C-section, that's okay too. And I already started thinking about what ways I could make it easier for myself if I did have a C-section. So again, you might hear a lot of women who say, I will not have a C-section, and they just honestly never even think about that option. The problem with that is they are so narrowly defining what's in the realm of acceptable that if it steps out, they're traumatized. And it becomes, I was like, no. Let's make everything acceptable, but then let's choose what feels best. And so in the end, I just could not deny that this was not the right option at the time. So we registered a hospital 10 minutes away. My midwife and I agreed that at the first sign of anything, and I would have hours of communicating with my body, my dear body, I know you're wise. Please tell me if there's any reason for me to ever, need to take any action that is outside of what I'm already doing. I was living in a state of total attunement, which is the highest attunement I've ever had up until that point, probably because it mattered more than ever. So by the time my water broke, beginning of my 39th week, I'm excited. Everything's progressing normally. I'm feeling good. My midwife drives 2.5 hours to meet us. I call my mom to tell her going to labor. My mom, unbeknown to me, cancels her work that day and starts driving the 7-hour drive over to see me and shows up at my doorstep. And the moment she shows up at my doorstep, my labor completely stops.
Yeah.
And then I go through a lot of working through wounding with my mom. And realizing that I had a hard time focusing on laboring because my mom and I have had a mixed relationship where a lot of times I take on the mother role. And so I had to, it's like the birth was preparing me for motherhood. It's every birth does, I believe. It's like the perfect custom prep course for you to be a mother. And thank God I acknowledged it, because I ended up talking to, again, the psychic in Germany. Don't ask. These people would show up to me. Never talked to psychics in my, but I was like, listen, I will listen to anybody who can help me in any way. And she said, your labor's stalling because of such and such. You got to get your mom out of the house. Hardest decision I had to make to say, Mom, leave. She left, my labor resumed, and then I didn't know how to relax with contractions. Even if I read all these birth stories and everything, the truth is, you tense up, or I would tense up when contractions. So my first labor was long. It was 21 hours. It was kind of the kind of labor you see in the movies. It was painful. I was uncomfortable. I was starting to doubt myself. I called my friend Susie, who had 2 home births, Susie, from England, who was in the US at the time in grad school, and said, I'm reaching this point where I can't do it. She was an angel, really. Was surrounded by angels. My midwife is an angel. Susie drops everything, gets babysitters for her 2 kids, and flies out on the last plane out of San Francisco, shows up 15 minutes after Zanti is born, which was so perfect. But it's because I called her. I was in the middle of transition. I was like, I can't do it. I'm fucking tired. I'm not a hero. I'm not trying to be a hero. I don't know how to do this. Somebody help.
She's like, okay, I'll get on a plane.
Yeah.
Friendship.
Yeah. So she is, I mean, I'm indebted to her forever. And my midwife prayed over me. My husband was so strongly, intuitively saying, you can do this. I mean, he was my rock at this point. So all of these factors came together. Had they not been there, I don't know if I would have had the birth that I had. Baby A, Zanti Breach comes out. We just watched the video the other day. It's amazing because, we had the video facing me, so I could see how Brenda had to turn him around. I mean, she was a magician. He came out balls first. You see these huge balls because, they're squeezed out of there. He's like, reach out and feel your son's balls. And then the little butt comes down and he comes out and she unwraps the cord. She had to turn him basically in order to get him out, which she just did so masterfully. She's so in tuned and connected. So in order for me to have trust in her, I needed to trust in her intuition too, right? And so it was all of these factors coming together. So he comes out and she lays him on my chest. She said that he was the only baby that she's seen in 27 years of doing this that made direct eye contact. He looked directly at me and directly at her, like boom. She's like, I've never seen a baby do that. And I was like, wow, you know? So we're crying. It's like this amazing moment. I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to give birth to the next one, right? Plus I'm exhausted at this point. But like, okay, baby A came out. Let's get Miela out. And 10 minutes go by and 30 minutes go by and Susie gets there and I'm like, okay, take Zanti to wash him up. My midwife is still sitting with me, you know, thinking I'm going to labor. She's checking for my contractions. I'm having contractions, but I'm dilated at maybe 9 centimeters now, but labor is not progressing in any way. So she goes, you know what? Just eat something, take a rest. I'm right here. She's lived with us for 6 days at this point, for 4 days at this point. And she said, you know, just everything is good. I'm going to keep checking on you every 30 minutes. Then it was every hour. You know, she's checking the progression of the labor. She's checking my temperature. She has me on echinacea, on vitamin C and everything because, you know, the risk for infection is high and all that. We keep monitoring me. I have this amazing meal. I had this meal planned post-birth. My friends deliver it. Now I only have 1 birth. I'm like, what the hell? You know, and I end up sleeping for a few hours off and on. I wake up. I mean, what is going on? The baby is not coming.
Was there any intensity at all at this point? Or
no. So I am not feeling any contractions at all. Brenda's telling me they're happening. She's like, put your hands on your belly. Do you feel them? I feel like a little quiver, but no contraction the way that I felt contractions before. Yeah. And then she tells me, well, I just checked. Miela turned around. She's transverse. That was the second moment of panic because I had read all these birth stories, transverse babies, you can't get them out, right? You're going to get a sideways baby out. Yeah. So my friend Susie's there. That's her psychic therapist in Germany that I had been talking to. She says, call Kim. She'll know what to do. I said, okay. So this is like this is about 10 to 12 hours past Zanti's birth. I call Kim. Kim says, have your midwife assess exactly what's happening. But I'm seeing a vision where your placenta is now blocking your cervix. What's the term for that? Where you are what is it called?
Placenta previa.
Yeah, placenta previa, exactly. So she's like, Miela can't turn head side downward because there's, you know, blockage happening. So she's saying, don't worry. Like she had Brenda confirm that this indeed happening. And she says, okay, have Brenda leave the room. And then we talked for about 30 minutes. I have a hard time remembering the whole content of the conversation because I went into an altered state of consciousness. Again, terms that seemed totally crazy to me before that now I'd studied in grad school that now I'm experiencing. So all I can tell you is it's real. The shit is real because I lived it. Maybe I'm delusional, but it felt real to me. Yeah. And in this 30 minutes, she had me talking to my baby and moving, like I was doing moving gestures around my belly and my uterus. And she had me talk to my daughter and she connected me and she said, she wants to come on her own term. This is a very willful child. I'm like, well, willful like me. Okay, that's fine. It's just she does not intend to come in as like on the coattails of your brother. She is very independent. She wants her own interests. So you got to talk to her and you've got to assure her that you are basically never going to try to lump the two together and like all of this stuff that, you know, where do you get it from? But to make a long story short, she said, okay, the placenta has moved out of the way. She's now turned around. I'm like, okay. Brenda comes back and she goes, yeah, she's now head down. Like she had turned around in the 30, 40 minutes that I talked to her. So I get off the phone with Kim and now I'm trying to get her to descend further. I go for a walk. I'm pretty sure we have tried to have sex with my husband. I'm so tired. I don't want to have sex. Whatever it is that I tried to do. And in the end, it was now like maybe 30 hours after the birth of Zanti. Brenda said, I can feel her, losing all words today. It's early in the morning here. The sac, I can feel the sac. I can feel her head, but she's not descending because she's still in the sac. So she can't go any further, basically. I think about this sometimes. I think if I would have not been that impatient, which most people say you were plenty patient, but if I would have, I wonder if she would have been born in the cold. Yeah. Because she was heading there. But I was getting tired and I said, Brenda, you can break the water, right? And she said, yeah. And I said, you know what, let's just do it. So that's the only intervention she did. she, you know, used like a little tool hooky thing and broke the water. And then within an hour, within 30 minutes, I was having active contractions. Now I could start to feel them. She was descending. And that was such a different labor from my first labor. Way easier, way quicker. The only time that I felt pain is I pushed, and I pushed too hard because I was like, come on, get out. So I had a tiny rip from the second. I had no rips at all that she had to stitch me up from the first birth. And the second birth, she flew out of me. I mean, like, and she was out at that point. It was 33 hours after the first birth. And every time I talk about this moment, I held her on my chest, and I was shaking and I was crying, and the sense of victory, like, relief is the best way I could describe it. Not victory like I proved something to it. It was like, oh my God, I'm alive and my babies are alive and they're healthy. Like, that's all I care about. Like, you know? Yeah. And then as I birthed the placentas, which is honestly like a cruel thing about birth. You're so tired. Like, why do I have to birth this like annoying mass that I birthed the placentas? And then Brenda tells me, Zanti is a miracle baby. He was 1 pound lighter than Miela and exactly the same length. Actually, he was 19.5 inches. I think she was 19. He was long. He was thin. He was a really thin baby. And she said, he's a miracle baby. He broke the water and came out because there was a clot, a huge clot that was between the placenta, on the cord next to the placenta. And he was no longer receiving nutrition. And so she said that he signaled to you, which is, you know, everything I've been asking for. Just give me a sign if you need to come out. If you like, I will be there every step of the way with you. There was clear communication between all three of us, or as clear as I could imagine it to be. And so he signaled to come out. He was ready to come out, but that also was why Miela wasn't. Miela was perfectly happy. She's like, let me live out full term. You know, we're separate babies. We're separate sex. We're separate placentas. Like, let me live out my own experience. And so, you know, knowing this in hindsight 2020 makes so much sense. You start to understand why things happen the way they happen. And there was just the feeling of empowerment to know that I knew it is indescribable. And at best, what I've heard among all the women from their births, at best, the birth is the custom plan for you to fully step into yourself, because you're going to need that for motherhood. At worst, it is disempowering. Yeah. That's, at best, it is hugely empowering. At worst, it is hugely disempowering. And there's a huge spectrum. And I feel like what you're doing and what I wanted to do and what I feel like the world is heading is women are now recognizing birth for being this. It's like our version of going to war or whatever men used to do to, you know, earn their stripes.
Yeah. It's our coming of age.
Right. It's a coming of age. And it puts you on your knees. You're the most helpless you've ever been. You have to look for support. You have to make peace with a lot of different relationships with your own childhood and your mother. And, you know, it is just such a perfectly orchestrated journey into yourself. Yeah. And I feel like I'm so glad that there's so many women now taking that opportunity. And, you know, society is whatever it is, you know, whatever the statistics are. I see a huge wave now coming in where women are advocating for themselves. Yeah. And that's all you really want. You want choices. I don't want every single person to have a home birth. Frankly, if you feel safer in a hospital, by all means. If you want drugs, by all means, but have it be empowering. Have it be resonant with you. Have it be something that's, you know, with awareness and with choice.
You said that so amazingly. I feel like, oh yeah, just such an amazing story. You've almost answered this question already, but how did it change you going through that experience?
I mean, I don't even know where to begin. I feel like if I was the kind of person that would give different names for different stages of my life, you know, some people go through a spiritual awakening, they change their name. I would say there were 4 or 5 times in my life where I would have renamed myself because I felt so different. And so this was definitely one of them. And just to say that as much as it changed me, what came after was what changed me even more. I had this triumphant birth, and all of a sudden now I have babies that I need to take care of and nurse. I'm exhausted. I'm lost. I hit a total, like from the highest high to the lowest low. And I developed, I was not willing to give them any formula. I was very adamant about it. I was no longer following my intuition. I was following some ideas that I had in my head about what a good mother was. Yeah. Which was crazy because I had them on this crazy schedule. I mean, my husband and I fought like cats and dogs. He said, "What are you doing? You're torturing yourself. This isn't right." I was like literally like a prisoner in my own life. I had this super rigid schedule and I got no sleep. And as you know, if you get no sleep, you become like a crazy person. I was probably hallucinating at some point. I mean, it was bad. And this is where me being willful was not a good idea, because I wasn't really following the path of well-being. And so I ended up with bad mastitis. I tried to go to a homeopath. It only got worse. To make a long story short, I had this medically free, beautiful, drug-free home birth. And at 6 weeks old or 7 weeks old, when the kids were, 7 weeks old, I'm in the hospital on morphine because the pain was so bad. And then they kept me there for 4 days, and they thought I had this super resistant strain of bacteria that got in a milk duct. They tried to extract it, like literally taking pus, 3 things like this out of my breast. And knowing what I know, I knew that this was a mirror of what was happening in my life. I had let myself get infected, and I wasn't willing to let it go because I thought that I would be a bad mother. Yeah. If I didn't give any formula to my kids or have any support or let go of this rigid schedule. And so in the end, they end up cutting out a big chunk of my breast, an inch cube out of my breast, basically, to fully clean it out. So I'm literally sitting with a hole in my breast, thinking, what the fuck, man? And this was one of those experiences that I feel like really formed me. I had this birth experience that was so empowering. And then 4 days, I didn't see my kids for 4 days. Yeah. Because I wasn't willing to have them join me if I had the super resistant strain of infection. They're 7 weeks old, and all the milk that I had pumped ran out within 2 hours. They had to be on formula anyway. That was the greatest irony. But again, life gave me the perfect lesson for me, that what mattered more than me breastfeeding them, even as important as that is, was for me to be a sane and loving mother. And that is a hard lesson, I think, for some of us to learn. And for me, it was. But I was in that hospital and I swore to myself, I am never again going to resist anything this much ever. And since then, I feel like not only have I been empowered, but I've given myself permission to take the path of least resistance. If it feels wrong, it's wrong. Even if it seems right. Even if some moral code is telling me that this isn't the right thing. If my body, if everything is giving me signals, I want to pause and I really want to examine it instead of moving forward like a tank. And I felt like in parenthood, that's become really important for me, and in my business. In parenthood, you never know if you're doing is right or wrong. You have to make a bunch of decisions. You don't know how it's going to impact your kids, who's their childcare provider, or what preschool they go to, or whatever, right? These decisions, do I give them a pacifier? What do I feed them? Blah, blah, blah. And so I felt like what that taught me is not only do I have an ability to connect with my intuition, not only do I really, have this sense of connection to my intuition, but that I'm not willing to ignore it because I have some predetermined beliefs. Yeah. And that was important for me. And in my business, it served me tremendously. When things feel resistant, I have literally cut out super profitable courses and programs when they no longer resonate with me. People think I'm crazy. I'm literally walking away from opportunities, but I just know now if it's not right, it's not right. And I always prove myself right. I always move to something even better. But, from somebody else's perspective, it might seem not rational or not, I don't know, sequenced enough, not logical enough. But who cares? I'm not here to be logical for someone else. I'm here to live a life that's satisfying to me. And I feel like that the birth and the early period of rearing the kids really taught me this. And I feel like I keep learning it at deeper levels. Yeah.
Wow. So, mate, so lovely to hear you talking like this, and your passion and your light always shine through, but it's just such an important message. And to hear someone else saying it in their way so powerfully, I know is going to help so many of our students and whoever else gets to watch this video. So thank you so much for
You're so welcome. And I love what you're doing. And I feel like, you know, I think the important part that sometimes I feel like as, you know, advocates of safe and comfortable and calm birthing, I think we can even get carried away of thinking that that's the only right way. And I feel like a part of what I want to say to your audience is that your way is different than anybody else's. And who knows what my next birth is going to be if I have another baby. Like, I got to have no illusions about that I'm somehow special. Maybe I'll end up in C-section, a bunch of interventions. But you can walk in any place, in any arena, with any people, with your sense of self with you. So my only encouragement is to develop that, your own connection with yourself, because that is something you will take with you for the rest of your life. And frankly, you're going to need a lot of as a parent.
150%. And just to echo that, I think that we're called the Calm Birth School, but it's about, our motto is never justify, do not judge. And never justify your own decisions and never judge anybody for theirs, because until you've walked in their shoes, you don't know.
You don't know.
It's all about creating a positive birth experience. And that comes in, well, there are 7 billion of us on the earth, and that comes in every different shape and form there is. So
exactly. And I feel like if we all can continue to support each other and you know, cheerlead each other, really, instead of judge or criticize. You don't have to like what somebody else is doing. That's their choice. But I feel like it's accepting your own decisions and accepting others' decisions and welcoming the diversity that brings. You know, I think that's a beautiful way to walk through life. And again, that's a beautiful way to train for being a mother, because your kids are going to be their own people. They're going to have their own opinions. If you are going to be militant about it, it's going to be a very painful.
It's like you think that they're yours, but they're so not. And as they get older, I know that your kids are similar age to my kids. And it's just as they get older in their own personalities, you realize every single day that they're their own people, and you have to celebrate that and encourage them to tune into their intuition so that they can stay strong and walk their own path. So it's that ever, you know, it's the ongoing circle of life. It's a beautiful thing.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And if any of your listeners have any questions or anything, I'm really active on social media. You can always find me on my Facebook page, or I have a ton of blog posts. I mean, if you're interested in learning more about how I've developed this, I have a ton of resources on my blog. That's pretty much all I talk about and all I do. So if you're interested and you resonate with my style, go check it out. But there are also a million other ways to do it. So just keep looking for the right path for you and you'll find it.
Yeah, Lana Schleifer.
LanaSchleifer.com. Exactly. Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys for watching this talk. And if you are interested in free hypnobirthing classes, then please log on to www.thecalmbirthschool.com/free hypnobirthing. And we will see you for the next Calm Birth School TV in just a couple of weeks. Thank you. Bye.